realm of science fiction. From content generation to data analysis, generative AI is transforming the way people work and drastically improving productivity. However, the benefits do not come without risks. And the technology has the potential to do more harm than good, especially when placed in the wrong hands. Security leaders have been tasked with balancing the needs of privacy and risk governance with a desire for employees to use these tools. So welcome to our monthly Canadian Cybersecurity Network webinar. We've been doing this for more than a year. We have a very cool guest today, and we'll talk about good and bad about AI. So let's start with our guest, Lior, CEO and co-founder of Grip Security. Can you please tell us about yourself and what you do?
Definitely. And hey, everyone. Very happy to be here on the podcast. It's getting great to see you again, and thank you for inviting me. Lior, I am the CEO and co-founder of Grip Security. We're a SaaS identity risk management solution. Basically, we help our customers to build an identity program and a GRC program for the organization using our own proprietary visibility and automation. And based in the US, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Nihal, CEO and co-founder of Horizon 3.
Sure thing. So thank you for the time. Sal Antani, my background, I was the CIO at GE Capital and then the CTO at Splunk, and then left industry to serve within the U.S. national security realm and special operations. And then that's where I met my co-founder, Tony, and we started Horizon 3, which does autonomous pen testing. So using AI to hack organizations to help them find their problems before the bad guys do.
A very good tool and service. And the last, John, sales lead in Nebula Consulting Group.
Thanks, Evgeny. Yes, I'm with Nebula Consulting. We're a boutique cybersecurity consulting firm, and we try and focus on partnering with vendors like Grip and Horizon 3, who are very strong when it comes to creating simple and effective solutions with positive outcomes in a very short period of time, unlike a lot of other cybersecurity solutions that we've seen out there.
I think it's very powerful what you're saying. Having short to the point is much better than long kind of fairy tales about what you can do without actually delivering on what's needed to the customers. So let's jump some of the topics. And I've kind of wanted to start with the idea of ChatGPT, even so we're talking about generative AI in general, but there's a feeling that before ChatGPT that only been around for like less than a year and a half, there was no AI. And it's definitely wrong because AI existed for a long time. We just didn't, maybe not everyone knew about it. So Lior, how about you first explain you on AI and did it exist before ChatGPT or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I appreciate it because ChatGPT, I think, is the flagship ship of AI. It's the one name everyone knows right now. And obviously, AI existed before. We've been using neural networks for over 10 years. You know, there's multiple companies, this Zoom alone, that started using AI way before ChatGPT was cool. What I think ChatGPT changed is it kind of commercialized how AI is being consumed. So it added AI at the fingertips of the average employee. They go, they write their data, they verbally ask what they need the AI to do, and it does it for them. And not only that, it made it very easy to build AI solutions on top of that. So ChatGPT is the flagship for generative AI. But when you think about it, there's thousands of different companies that are specialized wrapper for ChatGPT today or for large generative models, where it's changed the culture to the point where our employees assume they could or should use AI to do their job better. Even if we look at 5 years ago, there's thousands of startups that are based on the new capabilities that AI introduced, but it wasn't commercialized to the point where the average employee in the average job in the average company can consume it the same way. And I think this is the biggest changes we're seeing today.
See how maybe you want to join and add to your point to the position.
Can you repeat it? You're a bit cut out.
Nihal, do you want to add your point of view here as well?
Yeah, I think Lior was spot on in that with ChatGPT, my my dad, who's a 75-year-old electrical engineer, still passionate for technology, but retired, was suddenly showing me screenshots of all these super cool questions he was asking GPT and getting insights on. And so suddenly with GPT, it made this superpower accessible to so many people. And I think that's what allowed it to be rapidly adopted. So it's probably one of the first times we've seen that level of advancement rapidly commercialized to the average consumer. And it suddenly made AI feel real. I mean, prior to that, within the Department of Defense, we had Project Maven and amazing things that were being done in the use of AI in support of warfighters. You had Tesla and their use of AI in self-driving cars, but most people didn't have Teslas and they couldn't feel what that experience looked like. And then prior to that, some of the neural nets that went into recommendation engines for various pieces of software that were very much isolated into these walled gardens for specific types of business, B2B or enterprise users. So I think now the world has awoken to what the power of these capabilities can be. And I think the new one is between Midjourney and the things you can do to generate graphics or videos, it's once again been democratized and is creating this buzz, and more people, a large percent of the population are now exposed to the art of the possible in a way that isn't just PowerPoint or theoretical. And so I think that's really been the shift. It's not an evolution in the core technology, but rather the awakening of the art of the possible to a large group of people that were generally laggards in the adoption of new technology.
You know, I know you're working a lot with the customers, and I'm wondering, what do you hear from your customers about the AI topic before ChatGPT and kind of now?
Was that question to me?
No, John.
Or to
Sorry,
John?
to John.
Sorry, Evgeny, you actually cut out there. Can I ask you just to say that one more time?
Yes, definitely. I was saying that you're working a lot with customers,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering, what are your customers saying about ChatGPT
Sure.
versus the AI before ChatGPT?
Yeah, you bet. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll pivot a little bit to some comments I've heard related to Copilot, and some comments specifically about GPT as well. I think the challenge that we're seeing is in the implementation of the tool. So the promise is there, much like in the consumer market where as we've already heard, people's relatives or we ourselves have tried to experiment with the tool, sometimes with perhaps disappointing experiences. What I'm hearing in the corporate world, regardless of the size of the company that's using these tools now, is that it seems to be an uphill battle making the transition from trialing to execution and success and having it create efficiencies versus kind of clogging up the process with what can be a bit of a tough learning curve. An example I'll give is I was chatting with the customer last week, and they immediately ran into challenges experimenting with Copilot in the realm of privacy. And so what they were saying was that they're trying to create documentation, create reports using all the data that's within their 365 database. But in order to do that, it needs to go out to all the users. And there's no identification of which user's data is actually classified as private or personal. And so they kind of felt handcuffed a little bit. On the one hand, they've got this powerful tool. On the other hand, they can't really use it in order to accomplish what they want to accomplish because of these privacy issues internally.
So let's go a bit deeper on this part. We have generative AI, we have machine learning. I think there's a bit of confusion. What is the difference between generative AI and unsupervised machine learning, especially in the context of cybersecurity products, kind of what we see right now in the market? Leo, we ask you first, so maybe Nihal, you can go for this time.
Yeah, I have to go into it. And generative AI is a sub-product of machine learning or unsupervised machine learning, where newer technologies were able to train large language models on vast amounts of data and give them a mind of their own, or the ability to make decisions of their own. At the end of the day, a generative AI model is still a model that statistically predicts what would be the next word given an input, which is a text we give it, a text or a picture or anything else we give it. It's still guessing what's going to be it, and there's some AI magic behind it that make it works. But materially, I think when you think of the security difference, why AI we used before is not necessarily as dangerous as the AI we use now, there's two impacts to it. One is the willingness of the business to adopt AI, even to the point where they explicitly look for AI solutions when they look for a solution. Unlike before, when they first looked at the value, and if there was AI, it was a bonus. Now, when people are looking for a great tool to build a PowerPoint presentation, they're going to look for generative AI presentation maker, and not only presentation maker when they do it. The second thing, and I think this is why generative AI applications are being looked differently than the normal applications that we're using online. And this is where we kind of assume the vendors we're consuming leverage our data to train their models. And if they leverage our data to train their models, then our data somehow goes inside this big hive mind of AI and could theoretically get exposed on the other side for other users who are using the tool. And we've seen such attacks being leveraged before on trained models that leaked trained data. It was a big problem for AI companies that train on PHI and PII in the past, where theoretically you can tweak the model to extract the data it was trained on, and by that leak PHI and such. With generative AI, and most of those being textual, it becomes much easier to kind of jailbreak the network and get your data out. So I think that's the biggest risk when it comes to why AI is different today.
If I were to build on that, there is a level of skepticism that's appropriate, especially in the enterprise space. So if you think 15 years ago, when AWS started to make a lot of noise in the cloud world, a lot of the traditional vendors tried to cloud wash their revenue so they could also look like cloud companies. So I was at IBM at the time, and I watched the SVP of middleware try to claim all Tivoli revenue was now cloud in order to appease Wall Street. And we all knew that this is just traditional software being rebranded as cloud technology. And then you can see what the market realized this, and IBM is in the top 5 list of cloud providers now globally. So similarly, it happened in AI where so many traditional organizations have added AI as a label to their products that there's a little bit of an eye roll factor to this day of like, come on, you've been around 15 years and you're now an AI company, or is this just a rebranding like you did with cloud, n number of years ago? And so back to like the proof is, well, what is the AI component of what you're doing? And if I ask that question, if I were a CIO again, what I would want to hear for is, where is your data advantage? If you're an AI company, the advantage that you have, or the differentiation you have, is the amount of proprietary data you are collecting and adding to your training data corpus. If you don't have a path to collecting proprietary data that you can further train on, then it's hard to understand how you are an AI company. Because if you look at, and this is also a big problem with traditional on-prem software. Traditional on-prem software has no way to collect that corpus of data for them to train on. SaaS companies have that unique advantage. So at Horizon 3, for instance, we generated, whenever we run a pen test, we're collecting all of this telemetry of every machine we tried to exploit, whether it was successful or not, all the context around it, what were the configurations, what were the EDRs that were installed. All of that is telemetry that gets added to our corpus of training data. And we generate 1.5 billion unique attack events. We did in 2023, 1.5 billion unique events. A year from now, we'll be doing 1.5 billion events a month that are unique proprietary training data. So the first thing I look for is, what unique training data are you collecting and building over time? And how is that proprietary to you? And how are you using that to improve the underlying algorithms and models that you're using to deliver your outcome?
It's definitely very interesting information. And it's kind of leading me to the next question. But before we go there, we have people here in the audience. Please feel free to ask questions. Don't be afraid to also communicate in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you. You mentioned some ways to use AI, and it's lead to a question. What are the good ways to use AI and the bad ways to use AI? Maybe in examples. So, Snehal, maybe you can start with this one.
So there are probably a few different pillars of success and concern with AI. So the good ways are AI doesn't replace a person. It gives a senior person unlimited interns. That's the way that I think about it today. And so if I'm a senior engineer, I have unlimited interns through the use of Copilot. If I'm a pen tester using Horizon 3, I have unlimited interns in the context of Node Zero. If I'm a senior graphics artist, I have unlimited interns in the context of Midjourney and some of the other image and video generation tools that are out there. So that's where I think we are today in the current market. Now, I think there's clearly going to be a path where we see a flip where the seniority level continues to increase and the number of interns continues to get better. And eventually it's going to be very difficult for, say, a fresh kid out of college or a person that went through software engineering boot camp over 8 or 12 weeks to have any sort of ability to compete with the Copilot version of that particular software. So that's kind of the good area. And you see it as an augmentation to every profession, even in chip design, the use of generative AI to help do real estate planning on a particular chip, all the way up to legal and so on and so forth. The bad ways, though, we just saw the NSA do an announcement that various cyber threat actors used ChatGPT and other Gen AI tools to craft well-defined phishing campaigns or messages, use that to do open source intelligence reconnaissance against industrial protocols and so on and so forth. And so there's absolutely an accelerator to the bad guys doing research to commit fraud, to commit a cyber attack, to socially engineer your organization, because it's much easier, more powerful to use ChatGPT for research than it is to Google all that stuff yourself.
Lior?
Yeah, and Snehal, I like this quote: "Unlimited amount of interns." When you think about the bad guys, they have the same challenge that we have hiring talent for our companies. There's just not as many amazing hackers they can employ. So a big chunk of their workforce is what we would call interns. If we have a phishing center in Kenya or India or anywhere else, most of the employees don't have perfect English. Most of the bad guys don't have the knowledge or the expertise to look for security vulnerabilities. They just execute on a pre-given script. But now, automatically, their English is perfect and they can execute 10 times more if they use the right tooling. So it gives them an opportunity to do more with the same resources, be more sophisticated, be more challenging. And we're specifically thinking about text, but we're nearing the age where the generation of video or deep-faked video and voice would be as easy. And if you think of the traditional Microsoft support scam, when someone calls you with a heavy Indian accent, now they can do it with, Joe Biden's voice instead, with your boss's voice instead, with the IT team voice instead. So they have amazing opportunities to fool people in ways they weren't able to do so before. On the other hand, there's a lot of opportunities to do good with AI because our number one challenge as security professionals is that we don't have enough people to do what we need. If we can scale the people we have, I think we can scale faster than the attackers can, even though they move faster traditionally. There's massive opportunities to detect fraud, to understand what's right and what's not. And AI is going to be a cornerstone to do so. And it's not a surprise that if you're following the next generation of seed investments in security companies, even though AI is a buzzword for the last 10 years, this idea of solving existing problems with AI-enabled solution is the largest trend in the market today.
Thank you. There's actually a question from the audience about data poisoning from Kevin. How do you determine the reliance of the data you're collecting? In the old age, garbage in, garbage out. So how do we make sure AI is trained for the good stuff and not for the bad stuff? Not sure who wants to take it first.
I can give that a start. I had exposure to this in the early days of, say, Project Maven and what they did, what we did at Horizon 3, what we see elsewhere. The really good kind of data management or data collection for AI are systems or projects where they own the entire end-to-end, supply of that data. So they defined the data they were collecting. They intentionally collected that data, mapped to their definitions, and they stewarded or shepherded that data all the way through to the repository where it could be analyzed later. When you have strict control over the supply chain of that data that you're collecting, if you will, it is unlikely to have garbage in, garbage out because you're the one that defined it. Now, what you could end up doing, though, is you're too strict in what you've collected and you're leaving a lot of wisdom on the table. So there is a risk there. But if you can strictly control the end-to-end pipeline of data collection and then processing and then model weight adjustments and so on, you're in a good spot. Where you see like ChatGPT that trained on kind of public information, now you've got much higher risk of garbage in, garbage out. And there's a whole bunch of layers of control and cleanup you've got to go off and do. I think we just saw this with the Google AI release that they rescinded, where, I guess the term was, it was released with a woke mind, right, to some degree. So if you train and you over-rotate your training to a particular type of data, it's going to skew your results in a way that isn't necessarily accurate or realistic or valuable. And so I think you need to have tight control over your data pipeline end to end in order to ensure that you don't poison or corrupt the underlying training data that you've got in place.
Thank you. So let's change a bit of the focus. You mentioned about virtual assistants in interns, and I'm wondering if there is a use cases of AI in a SOC security operations center as a virtual assistant or as an intern. John, maybe you can start with this one.
Yeah, well, we are seeing some activity on the vendor side. There's some interesting tools. SentinelOne came out with their Purple AI recently, and I heard one of our security customers was complaining about all the customized scripting out there. Everyone's got their own kind of language or their own terminology that they like to try and lean in on, and the ability to say, hey, do you see anywhere where I'm possibly where my IT environment is infected with a certain virus? Just being able to speak English and then have that translated into that query. That's the type of place where we're hearing that it's very beneficial to allowing mid-level or even junior level analysts be able to perform up to that senior level. So that's somewhere where we're seeing the promise actually fairly quickly turn into efficiencies without having that big learning curve on the part of the customer.
Yeah, what do you think about this part?
I think the answer for me is an easy yes, because I'm a big believer in AI in general. Like, I think any practitioner can use AI as an assistant no matter what they do. In cyber, there's various opportunities in it. I can give even simple examples. My engineers use it for SQL queries. It's relevant for Splunk queries as well. But instead of writing complex SQL, what you can do today is give ChatGPT a description of what query do you want to write. ChatGPT is knowledgeable enough and technical enough to write a complex SQL query for you. So it's true if you want to write a complex SIM query, if you want to analyze big batches of data when you're doing an investigation, or when you want to unify your configurations across all of your firewalls. Theoretically, you can plug in all of your firewalls to an AI engine and ask it, do I have any gaps I should be aware of? Tell it what you care about, and it would spin out an outcome that would help you configure each and every firewall in the organization, something that would take, weeks of work to a single individual to do. Not being a SOC practitioner, I'm sure I'm less creative than the people who are gonna try using it to solve their daily challenges, but definitely there's massive opportunities for automation though.
If I could jump in, I would view it out in addition to that whole like senior engineer with unlimited interns, which is a funny way of saying outsourcing tasks. I think within the SOC analyst, there's a very natural progression across three steps. The first one is the role of those virtual assistants to accelerate your own learning and understanding. So you see LLM&R misconfiguration, and you don't really know what that is. Those virtual assistants are going to help you to really understand, why is this important? What do you do about it? And you're going to learn faster. So I think the kind of the first wave of adoption is the use of virtual assistants to accelerate learning. Because what you oftentimes see in the SOC, having overseen a bunch of those SOCs, is you've got the senior most people that know everything that's going on. They're the elite thinkers in the organization. And there's a fear of asking them stupid questions. And so the virtual assistant won't judge you. You can ask, as that SOC analyst, very stupid basic questions against that virtual assistant, and you are going to get smarter as a result and accelerate your own learning. I think from there, the next progression is using virtual assistants to help you tell better stories, because there's another big chasm between the SOC and the CIO. The CIO doesn't necessarily have the technical experience and background to get into the nuance and nitty-gritty of what's happening in the security realm. So how do you use that virtual assistant to help you explain the risk of a particular problem in a language that the CIO is going to be able to understand? So accelerate learning is kind of the first wave. I think the next evolution is telling better stories. And the third one is a big leap. I don't think virtual assistants are going to be there anytime soon, which is actually making better autonomous decisions. And that's where the real value is going to be. So you think about autonomous attack, which is what we do. There are no humans involved in making a decision to exploit a system and become domain admin. Well, what is the equivalent of that on the defensive side, where you're able to actually trust an algorithm to make those decisions for you? So I think virtual assistants accelerate learning. They help you tell better stories. And eventually, when those technologies have incorporated enough training data, we'll be able to make better autonomous decisions. But there's a pretty big leap between now and that third chapter.
As a person that spent 16 years in MSSP, I can also provide some feedback here. So if you think about a mature MSSP where you have playbooks and you basically have procedures for everything you're supposed to be doing for tier 1, tier 2, yes, there's a lot of creativity that we have in English tier 3. You can watch the AI to watch what people are doing. How is it working with the procedures? Are they consistent? Are they actually not missing steps in the procedures? This is one. Two, you can even watch them to say, are you sending the data to the correct customers? There are so many times when you get overwhelmed with information and you by mistake can say the data to somebody else. So AI can watch and say, hey, are you sure this is going to John? You just have to go to David. And slowly, or maybe faster, depending on how much data you have, the AI can suggest answers because you already saw how did you deal with this particular problem. How did you deal? Oh, you actually need to block a rule or a URL on the firewall. You need to make sure to isolate this machine. And now, as you mentioned, you can get to the point where it can actually provide all the responses. I don't think we're really there to actually do new responses. You mentioned about firewall rules. I spent a lot of time in the firewall industry, and there was companies basically helping you do the firewall analysis, rule analysis, and everybody were happy with the analysis, but nobody wants them to go and make changes on the firewalls because they were afraid of what will happen with the rules. So definitely interesting. Let's move to the landscape and the threat landscape. How's the AI changing it? And already you guys mentioned the bad guys can already use the same tools we use to craft better emails, to craft amazingly good emails, to potentially do research faster. What does it mean? What else?
I can give them ideas, but they're going to do it better than I do. There's a question of automation. For example, if you're running an email phishing center, theoretically, you don't need to waste time having 50 people replying to emails. You can have one AI engine running the conversation for you. A good AI engine can scam people autonomously. And it scales, again, infinitely almost. When you think of the opportunities for fraud, there's fraud usually, especially when spearphished, requires research, and this research take time, understand the business structure, who are the vulnerable personas, how do you fill people into a situation, and this research can be done autonomously by looking, for example, scraping a company's LinkedIn and generating an automated report. And then the second thing, there's opportunities for fraud because we can fake both conversations, video, and voice. And in those exact scenarios, my employees get on average 4 texts a week claiming to be me. I'm sure everyone today gets those, and they send thousands of those manually today. Imagine what they can do when it's going to be autonomous and when they can call instead of texting. That's the reality I feel, and I'm sure we'll see great security companies that defend exactly against that.
Yeah, in fact, this webinar audio will likely be piped into training data for voice to copy Lior's mannerisms and the way that he speaks so that we can scam his company. So, Evgeny, I thank you for arming the bad guys.
We have a question from the audience. Yang T actually asking the question. The potential of generative AI is also bringing tremendous amount of cybersecurity challenges, as we just spoke, as how security professionals can prevent AI from causing more harm than good, especially considering the slow adoption of AI in the industries. So this is an interesting one. We kind of answered it a bit. I think there are a lot of governments we need to do, but maybe you guys have a different way to answer this.
I mean, I can start, not to dominate the conversation, but so in 2022, as we trained up our models and execute autonomous attack, it took us 7 minutes and 19 seconds to fully compromise a bank. And that bank had every Gucci's tool you could buy, right? CrowdStrike for EDR, Splunk for SIM, and so on. 7 minutes and 19 seconds. In 2023, it took us 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And in 24, we'll probably be sub 60 seconds if we wanted to optimize for that. In sub 60 seconds, an AI with no humans involved and no pre-scripting or knowledge can start with initial access and compromise you. How quickly can your SOC defend and stifle that attack? In 60 seconds, can they detect the alerts, characterize the risk of the alerts, get permission to execute the playbooks to stifle those alerts, quarantine and prevent the outcome from occurring? And the answer is, for most places, no. Even the best MSSPs struggle with a 60-second response time. And so the future of cyber warfare is going to be algorithms fighting algorithms with humans by exception. And I think that offense is going to rapidly innovate and far outpace defense, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And then eventually you're going to see an inflection point where this blitzkrieg type strategy that ransomware and others are able to come in and within 60 seconds fully compromise your domain, gain access to all your data, lock you out. That's going to be the wake-up call. And so I think the answer is, it is the first mover advantage always favors the attacker, and AI is the huge first mover advantage for them. And it's just going to take a lot of tragedy before we are able to dramatically shift how we do defense.
Leo?
Yeah. So there's one. The end of the sentence is something I'm thinking about, especially considering the slow adoption of AI in the industries. And it's a question of AI doing more good than harm. There's a cyber-centered question, more hacking versus more securing the network. But then there's the generalistic question of, do we benefit from AI driving our business forward? And I think even though it's perceived that industries slowly adopt AI as a whole, the bigger company doesn't necessarily have a big AI initiative for the next generation of products it sends out. They're not necessarily going to be Gen AI centered in the core. The user population adopts AI way faster. So even if there wasn't a bold decision to invest in AI products, you can assume that the individuals in marketing, in finance, in sales, in development, they're using AI to drive business forward. Even if the company hasn't decided officially to benefit from AI, the business would benefit because everyone wants to do their job as good as they can. And they have tools at the tips of their fingers that can help them increase productivity, double it or triple it or even more. And those opportunities do good. They're not necessarily do good for the security posture because attackers are becoming better, but they do good for the world because there's opportunity to create more value. And that's going to be whether we officially allow it or not, or whether the company has made any deliberate decision to support AI. What companies can still do is that they can empower their employees and encourage them to use innovative tools. And Gen AI is still young, but if you wait a year or 2 years, there's going to be, even more impressive use cases and examples for things that we wouldn't know how we lived without. And second is that they can try and see how they can improve their internal project using it, but that's obviously going to take some time because industries move slow.
You see, it's going to be before generative AI and after generative AI era, because I'm going to separate this two eras. I do want to add something here. We're talking a lot about AI. Nobody canceled the elbow grease, as we call it, the basic stuff. You need to have your asset management. You need to understand your controls. You need to understand your architecture. There's a lot of stuff as a company you can do to become less hackable or more productive and more prepared. Even you mentioned about how fast it's taking to hack a company. But it doesn't mean you cannot have a response. It doesn't mean you cannot contain it as well. It doesn't mean you cannot have a good architecture to do microsegmentation, to prevent the bad guys to move. It's not so bad, guys. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do to become a better. You don't need to go and just basically, that's it, I'm done, and switch it to a different career. We sometimes jumping on these amazing tools and we forget the basics. Like, look on 618. I prefer 620, but 618 right now is all the controls. Understand your vulnerabilities, understand your scanning, understand your asset management. A lot of stuff you can do without AI. And guess what? AI can help there to do it faster, to be more ready. So this is kind of a hint, not get very scared.
If I could pile on, if you distill all that down to probably the single biggest way to improve your security posture in the world of these rapid attacks is carefully understanding the blast radius of a compromise in any part of your environment. So if you have a flat open network, your blast radius is significant. If you have a credential that is overly provisioned and permissioned, your blast radius for that compromised credential is going to be significant. And if you forget about the marketing terms around zero trust and so on and so forth, what you really are trying to do is methodically reduce the blast radius of a compromised host or a compromised credential in your environment. And if you can do that, then even if you accept that, if you have an assume breach mindset, assume the bad guys are going to get in, and assume that in 60 seconds they're going to have rapid attack. If you can minimize the blast radius, then you're going to limit the impact of that particular compromise. So this assume breach mindset and blast radius management are probably the two most non-marketing-ish things to go off and do to improve your security posture.
So I spent 5 years of my life in the Navy, different Navy, but in the Navy. And if anybody been in the Navy or watched the movies, the ships and the submarines are designed with redundancy. They're designed in one section can be breached. They're designed with multiple redundancy cables and motors and everything. So this is like basically, you need to think about it. Okay, if this part of my company is not available right now, can I contain it and still working? And it's also important to understand which part it's important to me. what are my crown jewels? What is requiring me to still make money, to still serve my customers? There's a lot of stuff can be done there. You have these jokes that we used to joke lately that everybody with a credit card is a CEO because they can go and just do any tools they want. This is where Leo or your company comes in to understand what kind of SaaS applications people use and where they actually put the data, potentially or the crown jewels data, without even asking the security people. So let's move and talk a bit about privacy and what can I do in the companies to help people to understand what they can or cannot do? Because we do need to create some understanding and some policies to explain to people in the companies what is the good use of AI and bad use of AI. John, maybe you can start with this one.
Yeah, well, I can certainly start it. It's I probably have more questions than answers from what I'm hearing in the field on that one. Again, I'll go out to tools, which is where we spend a lot of our time. We are starting to see some companies, you know, I mentioned that challenge before with that customer that was using Copilot and feeling restricted around their ability to use it. And what we're seeing is some innovation around identifying. So coming in and solving those problems and saying, listen, this is PII, this is not, and this is where you need to draw the lines, even internally. There's a company, I think they're called Searchlight, and so they'll go in and they'll look and scan everything that's inside your environment and try and help you locate not just PII in a traditional sense, but oftentimes there's documents, there may be photos, there might be emails that you don't even know are there, right? And that are in places where they're not supposed to be, potentially outside your network. And so we're starting to see some innovation in that area, but I think it's, at least what we're seeing, Evgeny, is that it's still a major impediment in terms of the level of comfort that people have in terms of how they're moving forward. And you know, the other thing, I keep talking about tools, but on the flip side, a lot of our customers don't want to be adding more tools all the time, right? They don't want to be saying, hey, okay, in order for me to actually execute on this, I have to buy 5 more vendors. I have to buy 6 more products on top of everything that I've already got, or I have to give Microsoft, a bunch more money. And so there's this push-pull that we're seeing around privacy in terms of how much resources do I want to apply to solve this problem, or maybe I just wait and watch for other people to solve it, and then I'll go the easy route once it's been figured out. We're seeing a lot of tension around that argument.
I want to touch on this notion of why do we fear the business is going to use third-party tools or third-party AI tools specifically, because in a way, there's no material difference between AI applications. We talk about ChatGPT, but there's thousands of different AI solutions out there. And you compare them to traditional third-party applications, most of the risks are quite similar. Those are third-party apps or third-party companies that have our data, that have our information, that have identities of our organization created within their applications, and are now exposing us to supply chain threats and to data threats on the back end. And I think if we look at the cultural change we've seen over the last 5 years towards BYOA, bring your own application, compared to bring your own device that we've seen in the last 10 years or so, as culture changed, we expect our employees to bring the tools that they need. It's just by chance there's this massive trend of AI tooling that allows them to do 3x or 4x compared to their old tools. So AI tools are leading the forefront of BYOA, but they're just the similar aspect of how our supply chain increased as businesses became more digital. When the cost of adopting new IT went down. It's easier to start using a new solution compared to 20 years ago when you needed to set up a physical server or someone had to ship you a server to deploy. And because of that, culture change in a way that supports adoption of new tooling, including AI tools. So if we want to look at the privacy risk, the risk is that while the business is owning adoption of technology, the business can do it without the guardrails of IT and security. They're creating exposure, but IT and security are still responsible for reclaiming the risk and reducing the risk over time. So if 10 years ago, they had to stamp every risk-taking decision, now the business is running by themselves, and security and IT need to get tools that allow them to build in guardrails. Some of them are around visibility, some around DLP, some around other stuff. But this is the main problem that causes Gen AI tools to be a problem.
Wondering, we spend a lot of time in the industry talking about shadow IT, how to find what people are using in a SaaS application, how to share files. We speak about ChatGPT a lot, but there's other AI tools, not just ChatGPT. Is there a better way to understand what kind of AIs, LLMs people use in the company to play with them?
I think it's so easy for an employee to sign up for ChatGPT and start using it or whatever else. If I understand your question, that if I were CIO again, it would be almost impossible to prevent shadow AI usage. It's just so easy to swipe your own credit card and go. So what the approach I took at Horizon 3 with my CEO hat on is accepting that people were going to go off and use these AI tools, whether I said no or not, and giving them the path of least resistance. So at least I could own the control point of where my company data was going when my employees used those AI tools. So we created an internal chatbot called Jarvis. It's a Slack bot. That Slack bot uses it was a DaVinci 3 model at the time, which means it had access to all the ChatGPT training data through the Azure integration. And we also trained it up on all of our internal Confluence pages, wikis, sales and training material, so on and so forth. And we effectively, and we can see every single query that goes into Jarvis through the Slack bot, and we can see if there's any company sensitive information in there, and we can prevent it or block that from occurring. And the reason why we went down this path was accepting that people were going to use ChatGPT and so on. But if I can train it up on all of my company relevant material, I can own the control point and make it frictionless for their usage. Then my sales and marketing people, which are the ones that are going to be using this the most, they can still rapidly author a tweet, a LinkedIn post, or a sales brochure. And I know that customer sensitive information isn't losing, or I'm not losing control over sensitive company information. And so I think you just have to embrace the fact that it's going to, shadow IT was bad, shadow AI is going to be exponentially worse. And the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is embrace it, own the control point, so you can govern how it's being used in a way that is absolutely frictionless and enabling.
Yeah, so, Grip is a SaaS identity risk management tool. One of our core capabilities is shadow IT identification, and shadow AI is a huge topic for many companies today. We see it again and again and again. I was looking at the back end, just on the AI applications that we're leveraging within Grip. And while most companies think of ChatGPT as the big AI, it's a good time to remind again, there's thousands of different solutions based on ChatGPT that can then dramatically influence the consumption of AI. So as an example, we use 18 AI applications, the tagged in the system: Jasper, Gemini, Labelbox, Landbot, 2 different applications called Writer, which are doing writer assistant. One of them spelled normally, the second one RYTR. But no one came to me for approval for any of those apps. And that's happening all across businesses, just because this is the new reality of how they're going to use IT. And because some of those solutions are so young, those companies that rapidly founded to ride the AI wave, many of them don't have the security configurations, capabilities, SSO support that we kind of assume an enterprise level solution would have. Maybe they will in a few years, but just by being young, they're lacking some of those capabilities. And if you remember, even OpenAI themselves just added SSO 4 months ago. It took them some time to do so. So my suggestion to companies who are trying to battle this notion of shadow AI in their company is to find a solution that can help you do it automatically, because while you can always get a snapshot of what's happening right now, it's going to change on a monthly basis, and the general knowledge of what is an AI app is something that takes time to accumulate. Finding OpenAI solutions, you can go to the firewall and see who logged into the website, but there's thousands of other solutions you're not familiar with, and I named some of them. I'd be surprised if anyone in the crowd knows them. I personally don't know any of them. So you need experts in this space in order to get a full grasp of what's being used.
We're going to transition to some of the questions from the audience. And we have question number 1 from Francis. What does the lawsuit by the New York Times mean to AI data models? I'm not exactly familiar with the lawsuit, but I'm guessing it's related to the companies using the New York Times for learning. You guys know?
Yeah, essentially it was OpenAI trained a lot of their models off of copyrighted content published by the New York Times. And so New York Times is accusing them of copyright infringement, I believe, is the actual lawsuit. And the answer is, if you trained your data on someone's original work and that work was copyrighted, there are laws in place that demand, payment or credit or whatever else. And I think that there's pretty legitimate risk for companies that do that. I don't think the lawsuit is going to be favorable for OpenAI if, in fact, the New York Times can prove that their information is being used for profit in an unauthorized way. But I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of these training models that are training on the open internet. But at the same time, the argument on the flip side is, well, Google does that for indexing, right? They're monetizing and linking back to your articles. But I think that's the difference. Google's linking back to the article, whereas OpenAI is claiming it as their own. And so I think it's going to be a pretty significant impact on OSINT training data and your legal risk as a result of it.
Thank you. Lior, anything to add here?
I'm not an expert, so I can spot Snehal, but it's people claim it's an internet rumor. Elon Musk bought Twitter so he can support his AI company in training data. And it's just a good example of how data becomes where we get value from. So AI companies, everyone can use an AI. Data companies are gonna be the one that have a gold mine. So New York Times has some great language data and knowledge about the world, and it's going to be interesting to see how it folds out.
We have another question from the guy here. This is to you. You mentioned earlier that the true test for the company's AI capabilities, the amount of proprietary data it can harness. I agree data will be a great differentiator. Do you see security industry consolidating happening in the next 5 years? I think we've been consolidating for the last 15 years. What's your view on consolidation from the supply side? Bigger, better AI-based security companies acquiring smaller security companies and consolidating from a demand side. Customers gravitating towards big names and consolidating their security stack with one vendor. It's not one question, there's like almost 5 questions, but we'll try our best. A strategy with the company like Palo Alto Networks is being upon.
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me answer that from 2 ways. The first is some background. If you go to RSA, you will see an explosion of booths over the last 3 years. A lot of those booths in the vendor and IT Expo were companies that either raised a seed round that struggled to get product market fit, or worse, they raised massive valuations in 2021 and failed to grow into those valuations. So I believe over the next 12 to 18 months, we are going to see significant consolidation in the cybersecurity industry out of necessity. that these companies are not going to be able to raise capital, and they're either going to go out of business and get acquired for pennies on the dollar, or they're going to get acquired by private equity and significantly streamlined and then chopped up and sold for parts. So I think we're going to see significant pruning of cybersecurity vendors over the next 18 months. I think that's especially heavy on the MSSP side, but very much on venture capital-backed security companies. So there is consolidation out of necessity, and I think that's going to be a huge impact on the industry. The second thing, though, is consolidation out of strategy. And I think that the platformization concept that Palo Alto rolled out last week, and they got beat up in the market for it, is the right idea, which is you've got these natural adjacencies that were highly fragmented tools prior. And how do you integrate those tools into a platform and more seamlessly collect and share data across them? And if you can seamlessly collect and share data, you start to add to that corpus of proprietary data, and you're in a position to leverage models and training infrastructure and so on to deliver higher impact insights. And so I think we're going to see consolidation out of necessity first. And then in parallel, we'll start to see in the longer run, more people copying this platformization concept from Palo, but with the intent of consolidating products into a platform that targets adjacent budgets with data that can derive more meaningful insights.
Thank you. I think it's a good answer. I hope it the answer people are looking for. So we are out of time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lior. Thank you, Joe. Nihal. Thank you, Generative Security Network, to hosting this. And of course, people that are watching for us for now, we're going to put a link where you can watch the past episodes and the webinars and this webinar as well later on or here as well. So thank you for joining and have an amazing day.
Thanks, Evgeny. Snehal, Lior, thank you.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.